We're here in Westminster Cathedral, one of the great churches of central London. You notice the darkness of the ceiling above you and the altar in the distance. But dominating everything, hanging high above the altar, is a huge painted crucifix. Here is the figure of Jesus, with his arms outstretched, nailed to the cross, his head bent to one side in the moment of death. It's a powerful symbol of how the death of Jesus is at the very heart of Christianity. Christians believe that something has gone wrong with the world and only God can put it right. Things are not the way they are meant to be. Suffering, loneliness, conflict, death. There is so much goodness and beauty in the world, but there's so much suffering and confusion as well. Christians believe that Jesus gave his life for us by dying on the cross, and then rose from the dead on the third day in the glory of the resurrection. His death brings us peace with God. It gives us the hope of eternal life. It brings us healing. And it gives us forgiveness for what the Bible calls sin, which is all the wrong we have done and all the harm that we have caused. But why did Jesus have to die? The Son of God became a human being because he wanted to be with us. He wanted to enter into the deepest reality of human experience, to share not just our joys, but our suffering, our loneliness, even our death, so that no one anywhere could ever say that they had been abandoned by God. He let himself be tortured and executed like a common criminal. It was his desire to come close to all who suffer and to lead them out to a better place. You might remember that terrible crisis in Thailand when 12 boys and their football coach got trapped in an underground cave. The tunnels were flooded with heavy rains and the exits were completely blocked. There was simply no way to dig down to them from the surface. The only answer was for a team of divers to go into the caves themselves, at great risk to their own lives. They had to find the boys, sit with them in the cave, and then lead them out to safety one by one. They brought light into the darkness of the cave, and food and oxygen and blankets, but they could only do this by sharing the same risks, the same fears as the boys themselves. This is what Jesus does. He comes to share our life. He brings light into our darkness. This is part of the meaning of the cross. But even more, Jesus came to give his life for us. The greatest love someone can have for another is to give up their life for them. And we have an amazing example of this here in our English history. Alban was a soldier in a Roman city near London. He had no faith, but one day he gave shelter to a Christian priest who was being hunted down by the Roman authorities. Alban was so moved by the example and prayer of this priest that he himself converted to Christianity. When the authorities finally caught up with them, Alban helped the priest to escape. And then he took the cloak that the priest had left, disguised himself in it, and let himself be arrested in place of the priest so he had time to escape. And when they finally found out that it was Alban and not the priest, they interrogated him, and they asked him to renounce his new Christian faith, but he refused. So they executed him. They beheaded him on top of the hill outside the city. Alban sacrificed his life out of love, love for his neighbor, the priest, and love for God. Imagine if you discovered that you were only alive because someone had given their life for you. Well, this is the reality. Jesus gave his life for each one of us on the cross, each one of us personally, for you, for me. He did this out of love. He carried on his shoulders the burden of every sin and the weight of every suffering. The cross of Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice. It undoes all the damage that has ever been done and sets us free. It is of infinite value because the one saying yes is the eternal Son of God. And all we have to do is to unite our yes with his and to try to love him in return.